Hey everyone, this is the Love of Cinema podcast. We like to talk movies. If you like to talk movies too, you come to the right place.
For me, the other thing is language becomes extremely important.
Yes.
I can't write in a language that I don't know, and I don't like my lines being written by someone else. So what I do is I learn the language. So when I was doing research for Udta, I learned Punjabi. When I was doing research for Sonchiriya, I learned Bundelkhand. And it's not just being able to write the lines, the spoken lines of the film or the show. It actually opens you to another world which you would have not otherwise known.
Hey guys, let's wind back the clock for a minute and go back to 1975, the year of Sholay, the biggest Hindi film of all time. Allow me to share a small anecdote around the ending of Sholay, an anecdote that ties in with our episode on Sonchiriya today. Everybody's seen Sholay, and we know that towards the end of Sholay, the police arrest Kapur and take him in custody. However, that wasn't how Gabbar's story ended originally. The original ending of Sholay had Thakur exacting his revenge on Gabbar by taking his life, killing him. The reason that Ramesh Sippy, director of Sholay, had to change the ending was because at the time of the film's release, the emergency had been imposed by the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi of the Congress Party. The emergency was a notorious time in the history of post-independent India, a time that witnessed censoring of the press and suspension of civil liberties. At the time of the film's release, Ramesh Sippy was asked by the censor board to change the ending because they said there is no way you can show someone taking the law in their hands. Why? Because that simply wasn't a good message to relay to the audiences during an authoritarian time. Sippy didn't want to change the ending, especially to a more cliched one, where the police show up and take custody of Gabbar. But he had no option other than to comply with the censor board. So he had to grudgingly change the ending to one where Gabbar is arrested by the police. And that's the ending we get to see today when we watch Sholay. I thought it would be interesting to start today's episode on Sonchiriya by sharing how the biggest Hindi film of all time was affected by the emergency and the prevailing circumstances in the country at that time. The exact period of time that Sonchiriya is set in. It's even more interesting because the very reason given by the censor board to Ramesh Sippy, that of taking the law in your hands, again ties in perfectly with Sonchiriya, a film that is centered on the band of dacoits, a group of people who take the law in their hands on a regular basis. This is Himanshu, and you're listening to the Love of Cinema podcast. Before moving on, as always, an important request to all listeners of the podcast. If you enjoy organic conversations centered on Indian cinema, Love of Cinema podcast was created for people just like you. So do consider subscribing. Independent pods like this one don't have a platform ecosystem for amplification and distribution. Independent pods rely on amplification through its listeners. So if you like the episode, please share the episode on social media. Also, do take a minute to review and rate the podcast. That would be much appreciated and would help the podcast. Back to today's episode. Like the bird with whom the film shares its name, Sonchiriya belongs to a rare breed. A breed of cinema that's hard to come by. It's truly a prestige picture that employs the ravines of Chambal, not just as a backdrop, but also as a metaphor for all-consuming world of a band of dacoits. Sonchiriya is essentially a story of salvation and greater purpose, told using elements of a revisionist Western. Sonchiriya is also my favorite Sushant Singh Rajput film, an actor I really liked, an actor who had a certain sincerity that made his performances stand out, even in some of his minor films. Think Sushant's Lakhna is an underrated performance, much like the film itself, and deserves more love and discovery. I'm delighted to have with us today Sudip Sharma, the writer of Sonchiriya. Sudip needs no introduction. Most of us are familiar with his work in films and streaming shows. Sudip has written or co-written some of the most popular films and shows of last 10 years, including NH10, Udta Punjab, Laal Kaptaan, and of course, Paatal Lok. Sudip's writing is always anchored by meticulous research, and Sonchiriya is no exception. And I believe there is a lot to learn from his writing, especially for aspiring writers. I got a chance to pick Sudip's brain on Sonchiriya, which happens to be his personal favorite film too. We chatted for an hour on a bunch of things, including key moments and scenes from Sonchiriya, influences on the film, conducting script research, casting Bhumi and Sushant Singh Rajput, and working with Sushant, who unfortunately is no longer with us. Join us for a closer look at Sonchiriya. Here goes. Hey Sudip, how are you doing?
Very well. Then thank you for inviting me for this chat. I mean, I know we have been trying to do this for a while now, but now that my shoot is over, I have some time on my hands, and I'm glad I could get on board for this.
So, Sudip, let's dive right into it. Today, we are going to be talking about Sonchiriya, a film that I really like, and I think it's one of the best films of the last 10 years, if not more. I wanted to start out, Sudip, by asking you this. I remember reading sometime after the release of Udta Punjab that you and Abhishek Chaubey were working on an action drama set in the 70s. And, at the time, I thought, oh, cool. I wonder if this is going to be like a retro urban action thriller, maybe something along the lines of vintage Bachchan like Dawn, or perhaps like one of Brij Sadhna's action thrillers. Of course, when the trailer of Sonchiriya dropped, I said, oh my, this looks completely different. I was completely taken by surprise. This was more like a revisionist Western. What I wanted to ask you was that could you share with us the germ of idea you had in your head for this film before you set out to flesh out that particular story?
It actually, it was both an inspiration of a moment and hard work for a year, actually, or more than that, that led us to Sonchiriya. After Udta, Abhishek and I wanted to work with each other again, and we started talking around the time that Udta was being edited, that let's do something else. And so for me, a place leads me to a story a lot of times, because for me, a place and a moment in time, when a moment in time is extremely important. I believe if a story can be set in another place than the one that you've chosen for it, and in another time than the one you've chosen for it, then it's not a story worth being told. It has to be like there's a very clear specificity that I look for in terms of time and place in a story. And what I knew was I wanted to go to Chambal. That I knew. It's a part of India that's very fascinating. It's a part of India that's not. It's almost like forgotten in our annals. It's something that we. But it is sort of the closest we have come to the Wild Wild West. In India. And being a huge fan of Western, I both Abhishek and I, we wanted to sort of do something there. So that was the moment of inspiration. We just knew, okay, this is what we want to do. But then coming up with a story for that, it took us a really long time. We actually wrote almost another script, before this, and
Could you tell us a little bit about that one, if you don't mind?
Oh, I don't remember it very well. It wasn't very good, and that's part of the reason why I don't remember it. It wasn't very good, and I think not wasted, but we spent a lot of time sort of discovering what we wanted to do with the place, and what is the kind of story that we wanted to tell. And I think it was very political, that story. And it became obviously political, in the sense that it became about the politics around emergency. Set in Chambal in Bundelkhand, and it had something to do with an erstwhile Raja Maharaja. It had a dacoit in it. It had a politician character who was sort of modeled on Indira Gandhi, and we were basically trying to do a microcosm of the politics in the country during the emergency and set it in Chambal. So it was it was an ambitious idea, but we couldn't crack it. I'll be honest with you. We actually almost wrote a draft or an at least an outline, very detailed outline. Worked on it for a few months, 6 months or so, and then after that, one day I think I landed up at Abhishek's place, and we were both chatting, and one of us looked at the other and said, "Man, I'm not feeling it," and the other guy just jumped on it. I don't remember who it was, and the other guy just jumped and said, "Yeah, man, I'm not feeling it." I'm glad somebody said it. It's been 6 months that we've been doing it, and we aren't quite feeling it. And then we're like, okay, now we need to start thinking, and then you start panicking because you've wasted so much time and all of that, and
Right.
and and funnily enough, within 2 days we cracked the plot of Sonchiriya. It was just, I don't know how it happened, but within 2 days, we cracked the plot of the broad basic plot of Sonchiriya. Okay, this is what the story is going to be about. Throughout all the other characters, what we like is the Dakat character. Let's keep him. And you know what? We should just give it some sort of a momentum in terms of a ticking clock, which is when the whole the angle of the little girl came in. So we were able to crack a lot of it in 2 days, and then it was the hard work of
Right.
going back to the drawing board and writing the outline all over again.
Right. So it's interesting that you mentioned that you always wanted to set this in Chambal, and then you also said that you wanted to set it against the backdrop of the emergency. I'm still wondering about that because, for me, essentially, Sonchiriya is a Western. It's essentially a story about salvation, right, or
Right.
deliverance. And was that strand always there in the original story that you were writing as well?
Yes and no. It was there, but I mean, we can call it complex or in a more obtuse sort of a form. It wasn't coming out as clearly as it comes out in the final film. And I think part of the reason for that was, I think we kind of somewhere got lost in the politics of it, and there was a lot of anger inside both of us, a lot of anger regarding the politics of that time, and also how the politics of that time had somehow started mirroring the politics of our current times. And
Right.
you know
Right.
we kind of got overwhelmed by that, instead of putting the story first, which is how it should be. And why emergency? Because I mean, it was a very fascinating period of Indian history, Indian
For
political
sure.
history, social
Yes.
history for sure. And apart from that, it was for Chambal itself. The 70s was actually a very uh, sort of, you know, the times when everything changed. So it was around the time that I also went to Chambal, went to Bundelkhand, and I did my research there. I spent a few weeks there. Met a lot of those erstwhile dacoits from that era, Moor Singh Kuchar, and a lot of other dacoits and policemen, and all of that. And something fascinating that started emerging was there were like these three eras of dacoits in Chambal. So
That's
the
interesting.
first yeah, and when it came, and I was like, oh, this makes sense. The first era was really of the Baghi. It was the Baghi era, which lasted like till about independence, which was the rebel at that point of time was actually fighting either the British, or he was fighting the good fight. He was fighting the right fight. He was either wronged, or his clan was wronged, his caste was wronged, and he wanted to sort of, choosing the way of the violence to take revenge, which I do not subscribe to, but that was what it was. And then came, from 50s onwards came the Dakat era, which was more professional Dakat gangs, and they were still sort of coming from a place of injustice, coming from a place of being badly treated. Uh, but they also became professional gangs in the sense that they started doing kidnappings. They started kidnapping rich people, thakurs, netas, and would ask for firoti for them. or they started doing these big loots, in the name of running the gangs, and it also sort of became more professional. The whole, sort of the organizations of the dacoits, then the numbers soared. So, you would typically have a gang of 70, 75 people, then they would have cooks, and they would have malishwalas, and they would have, bhajan mandalis with them,
It's
and
an
they would all
entourage.
travel
Yeah.
together. Yeah, it was like a full-fledged entourage, and it was quite. So that was the second era, and from the mid 70s onwards started the whole loot era. It was sort of the death of the big gangs, the death of the dacoit, both in terms of how professionally organized they were, also in terms of, more importantly, also in terms of the moral code and the strict moral code that till that point of time the Bagi or the dacoits of Chambal would be following. Then it became more about just making money. This was also it's around the time when Fool and Devi's gang came in and all of that. That was the last of the sort of the dacoit era, and it kind of moved into also other sort of uh, caste gangs started getting formed. It became like a free for all. Where earlier it was only the Thakurs mostly, and then it was the Thakurs and the Gujars, the so-called warrior clans, and then it just became a free for all. So we wanted to sort of, in a way, the Wild Bunch does, sort of the last of the days, of a gang like this. And
Makes
that's
sense.
why the 70s and emergency kind of just, kind of gave a like a nice political flavor to it.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thanks so much for that background because it all makes sense now. And I was going to ask you about film references and everything, but we'll touch on that later on. Sudeep, I wanted to start talking about the actual scenes and the script about the film by talking about the opening and the closing scenes of the film. I am a big fan of both those scenes, and I'm a big sucker for films that have great opening scenes and great closing scenes. So, Sonchiriya had me at the first scene. I would love to pick your brain to learn more about writing such scenes as someone, who has wrote a lot of great scripts. So the metaphor of the dead, dangerous snake, wild creature like a snake, for an equally dangerous, notorious dacoit like Mansingh is great, who happens to be dying a slow death internally because of the guilt he's carrying that we'll find out about, and accidental yet awful massacre that is eating him from the inside. What can you tell us about that first scene and how important it was for the movie to set that kind of metaphor and for foreshadowing what's going to happen in the movie?
Oh, very important. I mean, we wanted to sort of set the mood of the film right up. That this is the sort of film is going to be. That sense of doom, that sense of everything is dying in these parts, and that anything bad is about to happen at the right turn in the beard. We wanted to set that mood. That was one reason. The other reason was, and it came during my research. These bandits, they were a superstitious lot, all of them. Uh, they weren't particularly educated. They also didn't have any modes of communication. You are in the Beherd, and this is the 70s. Uh, they would rely on nature to give them signals. They would rely on nature, Mother Earth, or gods and goddesses to tell them whether to go for a hit or not, tell them whether to go for a kidnapping or not, whether to go for a loot or not, whether today is going to be the day they are going to die or whether they are going to survive the day. And you know there were a lot of these sort of uh, you know interpretations of dreams, interpretations of things that they would see, which we use throughout the film. Actually, for this particular one, a dead snake is considered a metaphor for death between them. So if you see a dead snake, it's like it's a sign of doom, and you are not supposed to walk down that path, because it's the gods telling you that if you still walk down this path, you will have death waiting for you. And Mansingh, knowing very well, and that's why the gang reacts like that to him, where it's almost like he has a death wish upon him, which kind of comes out to be true,
Definitely. Right.
later on in the film. It kind of makes sense, and we wanted to set that sense of, oh, this is who the man is, and that he's going to die by his guilt, and he's going to die by his values, even though he might be a dreaded bandit. And I thought the Dead Snake kind of just set that up, very nicely.
And did you guys fight over like what was going to be the opening scene? Like, because usually, opening scene is such an important piece of the puzzle that there's always going back and forth, and everybody has many ideas. And were there any competing scenes that you guys had lined up for the opening?
No, not really, not
Okay.
really. Actually, the opening of the film, actually, or the opening of whatever that I'm writing, I have to crack that first before I can move on with the script. It's a very, very important, the opening image, the opening scene. It's a very,
Right.
very important part of of writing a screenplay for me. And it's I think I've very rarely changed. Oh, I did change that in Paatal Lok, but otherwise, the opening scene actually mostly stays in my case, because I put in a lot of thought before I write down that scene.
Gotcha. Okay. Then the last scene, it nicely kind of bookends the whole story, where the constable loads his rifle and points it at Ashutosh Rana, who is ready for his deliverance, almost with a certain glee, flashing a white green, completing so to speak, the circle of salvation. Can you tell us a bit more about that scene?
Yeah, I mean, so it was partly what you mentioned, the circle of deliverance, the circle of salvation, that this life and death, and it's all going to just go on, in this, in this universe that we are setting up. Uh, the other reason is also, like the uh, the I've always been fascinated by the image of these two snakes eating each other up, which is considered the sort of circle of infinity and of life and death, and all of that. And for me, it kind of sort of mirrored, without putting in a snake in the last scene, it kind of mirrored the idea behind it. The third thing that we wanted to actually touch upon is that, things are never going to change in Jumble or a place like this, where because it's
It's
just
stuck
hinges
there.
so much on caste. It's stuck there. It's hinges so much on caste and caste violence, so that, and that's the words that come. That's सांप खाएगो चूहे ने खाएगो, सांप ने खाएगो गिद्ध, यही नियम दुनिया को कह गए साधु सिद्ध. So it kind of just, put in put in that philosophy like really nicely, and hence the scene.
Yes, yes, great scene, great scene. And like I said, it nicely bookends the film. So another great scene. Another interesting scene, Sudip, I thought was that, when Fulia kills Beniram, she literally bludgeons him with the rifle butt, I think. And we don't see her actually bludgeoning him. The camera stays on the gang, I believe, away from the act of violence, so to speak. And we only hear her pain-filled screams, and I found it interesting because it sort of shapes your perspective around that particular act of violence, in the sense that it is payback for all the pain that that guy has inflicted upon people like her, and the pain is represented through her screams while he's the person who's actually getting killed. What was that deliberate in the sense as to you didn't want to show that particular act of violence and who's the perpetrator and who's the person upon whom the violence is being inflicted on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was also, I mean, for us, the whole track of Beniram was actually Fulia's track, because uh, through that character and through the character of the little girl as well as Indu, we were actually trying to sort of build an image of the women in these parts,
Right.
and in the kind of life if they choose to sort of stand up for them, the kind of life that awaits them. uh, so it was partly a writing choice, and I think it was also Abhishek's choice on the day of the shoot. I think, and I really liked it. When that happened, when I saw it, I was like, oh, nice. I think it really makes sense to really just focus it on Fulia and on the gang, rather than on the guy getting killed. Partly because it also uh, violence, if you don't see it, it feels a lot more violent. It because then it's your imagination driving towards it. And imagination, there's no more imaginative camera or greater camera than your own imagination. And
Right.
I think that worked really well for that.
Okay. Yeah. Much like horror, when you don't actually show.
Right.
Right. Let's talk about the casting for a minute. And there is a reason why I asked this. Casting of especially Bhumi and Sushant. Casting is trickier than most think because, of course, you want to cast someone who looks the part. But casting against the grain is also important because it can really elevate things by a notch or two. Could you share some of the reasons behind the casting choices for Lakhna and Indumati?
So I'll be honest with you. Casting in if you're making a Bollywood film, a lot of it is also sort of
Right,
uh,
right. You
also
don't
sort
have
of
much say.
yeah, and it was an expensive film, because you're going to be shooting in Chambal and action and all of that. So, you know, uh, a producer is not going to let you cast unknown actors for it. You would need some kind of stars for the leads at least. Uh, that was one of the sort of boxes that was drawn for us, and we had to pick and choose from. But inside that, I remember having the discussion with Abhishek after we wrote the script, and I think Sushant was the first person we approached for this, and it was really he was the first choice, and it was really because uh, I mean I like the fact, and both Abhishek and I, we like the fact that uh, there is a small town boy in Sushant. I mean, he's from a small place. He's grown up in a small place. He's seen that world. Which some of the star kids from Bombay might not be able to relate to at all. I mean, with all due respect, I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah.
there are a lot of great actors in there, but that authenticity we felt was important. Uh, with Indu, Bhumi's a really hardworking actor, and she gave it all. So although she's a Bombay kid, but she's just completely surrendered to Abhishek's vision, and worked really hard. I've not seen a more hardworking star, in my experience here, and and I think it worked out well for
Yeah,
us
both
in
of
that
them are
sense.
excellent, as is
Yeah.
the whole ensemble. I was just interested because I thought, yeah, Bhumi was excellent, and I really loved Sushant. I mean, Sushant was terrific in this film, and I think he deserved more praise for his performance. He was an actor I really liked, but wanted to talk more about Lakhna's character and the way Sushant went about his portrayal of Lakhna. And I wanted to use this character if you could, walk us through in terms of developing the character. How did you develop the character of Lakhna? And then I had a couple of, things in the follow up to ask you. But could you walk us through development of a particular character by taking Lakhna's example?
Yeah, so I mean, Lucknow was actually there in the original idea that we discussed. That character was he was actually one of the characters that we picked from the original idea that we trashed, uh, and we were actually looking uh, for the redemption arc in this particular character. So the idea was, uh, he is uh, somebody who always took pride in the fact that he's a bandit. For him, being a bandit was a matter of choice. It was a profession that he took up with pride, and he looked at it with respect and dignity. And he thought that he was actually doing deliverance. He was actually bringing justice to this world. They almost looked at themselves as law and order, as
Right,
a
right.
parallel, as a parallel law and order machinery in these parts, and maybe for some valid reasons also, you know. And when that foundation is shaken, when those beliefs are questioned, how does the character deal with that? And that was something very fascinating. It's a it's a it's a Daku with an existentialist problem, and
Ye-
that's always fun,
Yes,
I
that
mean,
makes for
how
good
often do you get
storytelling.
to see that? Yeah, that's a really fascinating character, and I think Abhishek mentioned that line in one of our discussions when we were discussing, and I was like, okay, got it. The moment he said it's a Daku with existentialist problem, I said, okay, got it. I have the character completely in my head, and everything just sort of followed from there. How does this person sort of make peace with these two very this churn that's going on inside him, this pull that's happening inside him, and how does he manage to sort of emerge out of it or not? And what happens to him at the end, and does he manage to find peace before the eventual bullet gets him? That was really the journey with Lucknow's character.
Right, right. And his end is also very interesting because, in the end, when he's killed by Ashutosh Rana, before his instinct is actually to fight back, but he just decides to, surrender and thinks it's time to go and just doesn't kind of, raises down his gun. So that was very interesting. It's very interesting that you mentioned that Abhishek mentioned to you that it's a Daku with existential angst. I have in my notes here about what Sushant's character reminds me of, and maybe it has something to do with the lemon drop trick, but I don't know. But I remember when I was jotting down notes for our chat, I remember what I thought about Lucknow's character the very first time I watched Sonchiriya 3 years ago, was that he always came across to me as Jay of Sholay with existential angst. So I don't know why I thought about that, but maybe it has more to do with the lemon drop trick and the trick coin or something like that. But I always thought that this character has some kind of similar vibes of those, and maybe it's just the way that Sushant has played that character or not. But that's what I thought about Lucknow. Were you on the sets, Sudeep, during the making of the film?
For a very few days, actually, because I was working on Paatal Lok at that point of time, and we were in prep for we were actually finishing the writing, and then I was getting into the prep of Paatal Lok, so I couldn't be there on the set as much as I would have liked, but only for a very few days I was there.
I see. And any anecdotes around working with Sushant? Any things you could share for Sushant fans?
I thought he was really into it. He was really in the zone with the script, and uh, I thought he gave it all. And the kind of dedication and the kind of it was just so there were these stars who were working in the film. There was Sushant, there was Bhumi, there was also Manoj sir, Ashutosh Rana, and then there were
Ranveer
also
Shori,
these
right?
bunch of Iran Vishwari. There were also these bunch of unknown actors. But that set and it had this really communal vibe to it. It had this. It was like everybody believed in the script. Everybody believed in the film that was getting made, and they were all working their asses off. And it was so great to see that. It was everybody would be working together, then they would go back and all would party together, and either everybody would be in Sushant's room or Sushant would be in everybody else's room. It was actually uh, it's one of the best set atmospheres that I have seen. And I think it showed in the film the kind
Yeah,
of
that
love that
reflected on screen. Yeah.
yeah, each of these actors put in, and the kind of camaraderie that they had. I think it showed on the screen, because the gang really needed to feel like they were a gang and knew each other, and they were ready to take a bullet for each other. And I think
The
the
bonding was
actors
there.
did a really good job. Yeah, it was there.
Right. Sudeep, I wanted to talk about the scene at the temple. First of all, would it be accurate to say that that's the midpoint of the story?
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to again pick your brain in terms of kind of creating tension, anticipation, all that good stuff in your story using this particular sequence from the film. The way I saw this particular scene is that the scenery of that scene has the air of a set piece. Which is very cool because it's just a simple temple in the middle of fields. But just the location itself, kind of foreshadows that shit's going to go down here pretty soon. And so I just wanted to, again, ask you if you could tell us, in terms as an exercise in creating tension, anticipation in your story, what are some of the tips or something that you could elaborate on using this particular sequence from the film?
This particular film was actually a series of set pieces. So one of the films, one of the westerns that I like, revisionist western, is 310 to Yuma, and
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's actually
The old
if you
one,
look at the
right?
film, it's a series of set pieces.
Yes.
The old one, yeah,
Yes.
and it's a series of set pieces, and it. I actually wanted to try something like that with this one, and I always sort of in action, if you're able to weave, what a set piece does is it helps you play with the tension, like you said. It helps you like slowly crank up the tension before the viewer can't take it anymore, and something is about to happen and you're at the edge of the seat. Horror films do it really well. Some really good action films, they do it really well, especially moody actions, not just slam bam ones. Uh, and I wanted to try that with this particular film. If you enter into a scene and you sense that there is something eerie about this
Definitely.
place,
Yes.
something doesn't feel right, and you slowly amp up the tension and you layer it up with more characters coming in, and the tension rising before it's all going to explode. And this worked really well for us because it was also the midpoint, and this is the point of no return. This is the point when Lucknow has decided to take things in his hands, and now he's sort of broken away from the gang, and there's no coming back from here, and now he's on his own. And that it it just kind of gave that place and the setting, and this particular sequence gave us the opportunity to explore all of these elements with it.
Very interesting. Yeah, one of the my favorite scenes, sequences rather from the film, and like you said, it really cranks up the tension, and I love that scene, and even the locations, and just like I said, the air about that scene is about to go down here. It's a beautiful scene. Let's talk about a little bit about humor and writing in humor, mixing in the things for such a tense and taut script like Sonchiriya, because going back to something that you said, like a typical Bollywood film, tries to mix up humor, and usually, it doesn't come off that well. But I really like the humor of Sonchiriya, and I can think of three instances top of my head that are hilarious. At least I found them hilarious, and they were nicely mixed in with the things. First is the Bagi Ka Badla scene, where the guy mocks the film, saying that they have shown dacoits moving on horses. That was a very funny line, I thought, because it kind of mocks all of the Hindi films of the old. And at the same time, our conventions that we have, that this is how Dakus come in, kind of storming in on horses and all that. Then the other instance was the life in prison conversation. That was fairly hilarious too. And then Wakil's hilarious bluffing with the police force in the climax of the movie. And all of these three I thought were so organic to the plot and so organic to the story that they were not forced. And not only were they not forced, but it's it's fairly difficult for you to not chuckle at those lines, when they come, even when the mood is so somber and tense. Is this something that's deliberate, or is this something that just flows when you're writing it, or based on the characters and you're just thinking from the character's point of view?
I think, yeah, I think it's mostly organic. I like bringing in humor, especially at really inappropriate times and in appropriate moments.
When you
The
least
black humor
expect
really
it,
works.
right?
Yeah, when you least expect it, it really works for me. Also, the other thing about these characters, which is fascinating, is that we look at them as dacoits. We look at them as people dealing with a life and death situation here. But we also need to realize that for them this is daily life. This is how they live their life, and it would be impossible to live this life without a sense of humor. To be able to walk 20 miles across Chambal in the hot sun every day, which is what they would do, not sure if you'd get your next meal or not. The only way you could hack this life is through humor, which is,
Yeah.
and that's why. And they're a funny bunch. I met a lot of them, and they're mostly quite funny, and they have a sense of humor, and I wanted to tap into that side of Chambal, that side of Bundelkhand, that side of the Dakas, of just how naturally, without trying too hard, funny they are.
Oh, you definitely succeeded. It's one of those great instances of humor that's it's almost like dry humor, I guess, but it really works. Did you have any old films as references for this film? You mentioned The Wild Bunch, and a lot of people have said that there is a overbearing influence of Peck and Pa and Wild Bunch on this one. But there are at least a couple of moments in the film that seemed nods to me. They could be deliberate. They could just be happenstance. But one is when Vakil Lakhna, Indumati, and Sonchiriya are holed up in the ruins fighting the police. And that seemed like a direct nod to Newman and Redford in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And the other more interesting one for me was the fabulous dissolve from the little girl's eyes to Ashutosh Rana's eyes. I absolutely loved that dissolve. And the scene that reminded me, that particular scene reminded me of the cuts in the climax of Once Upon a Time in the West, where the camera cuts from extreme close up of harmonica to the young Frank and then back to the young harmonica. And I thought that had a similar, kind of effect on me. Were those deliberate references, or was that subconscious, or was that something that you wrote in the script?
I think it was, some of it was deliberate. Some of it kind of made its way
Right.
into our consciousness while we were making it. So Wild Bunch was of course, it
Sure.
was it's a film I love, and it was one of the there's one film which surprisingly not too many people mention, but for me that was actually sort of uh, the reason why I wanted to set this film in Chambal. One of the reasons was Bandit Queen. It's a film that
Absolutely.
I absolutely love, and I remember watching that film in a theater in Delhi. I was in school then when it released, finally, after all the brouhaha and the SC order and all of that. And I just remember being stunned by it. I had not seen anything like that ever in my life.
Same. Yeah.
And I was watching it in a theater with a bunch of very regular film going audience. It wasn't cinephiles or something. And I remember the first time, it was pretty much an early scene in Bandit Queen when Fulan Devi comes on screen and says, "Main hu Fulan Devi bहन चोद." And that was not the sort of language we were used to hearing in Hindi films. And I remember the whole theater burst out laughing, you know, and 15 minutes, 20 minutes into the film, or half an hour into the film, they were all sitting on the edge of their seats. Nobody was moving, and everybody got what this film was. And it's a huge influence on me, that particular film. And for Sonchiriya, it was, you know, I mean, it was my tribute to one of my favorite films, one of the greatest Hindi films ever made, actually. So Bandit Queen was one. Once Upon a Time in the West. A lot of these westerns, actually. Wild Punch. Yeah. And a the western genre is not very, it's not a very Indian genre.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
not a
Yeah.
genre
Yeah.
that we make a lot of films here.
Yeah.
So we wanted to sort of do a very Indian take on it. I mean, do a western, but in a way that's organic, in a way that feels very rooted and very authentic to us, but also paying hat tips to all these great masters that we have grown up watching. I mean, I love Peckinpah. I think he we have somehow forgotten his influence on cinema, and I think he's one of my favorite filmmakers.
What's your favorite Peckinpah film? Wild Bunch?
Uh, I love the Wild Bunch. I think Wild Bunch. I think Wild Bunch.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, yeah, it's great. I'm a big fan of Bring Me the Head of Alfredo, so I really love that film. Um,
Alfredo Garcia, yeah,
yes,
that one is really nice too.
it's
And
awesome.
I'm blanking out on the other one. Shit, I don't believe this. Uh, Maybe it will come to me.
Yeah, this is one more thing, Sudip, I wanted you to touch on. Like I said, Sonchiriya is an excellent film, one of the very best of last 10 years. But looking back now after 3 years or so, if Sonchiriya was still a script that was sitting on your computer, yet to be filmed, is there anything which you might have wanted to tinker with, polish a little bit more? And my follow-up question to that is that how many drafts till the shooting script for Sonchiriya?
I think we did three drafts of it.
Okay. Wow, that's very
You know,
impressive. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't do too many drafts.
Okay.
So there was one draft that I worked on for 6 months and we discarded. So that I'm not counting because that wasn't even the same film. Although it was a lot of work that went into it. But once we cracked what is the film that we wanted to make, uh, I think it was the third draft that we went. The first draft was actually pretty close to it. Would be 75-80% of the final draft. Actually, it was pretty. I
Almost there, right?
we got that right, and then the second and third drafts were just sort of making it better. you know but yeah, I mean, if I had to go back to, I haven't seen the film since it released. I normally don't go back and watch
Oh, really?
any of my
Okay, I
stuff.
see.
Yeah, I've never seen anything that I've done
Yeah, a lot of
later on.
filmmakers I talked to, I mean, some I've talked to that they have never watched their film. I mean, even
Yeah,
like,
I find it super awkward.
okay,
If I have to sit and watch it with someone, even if it's even if it's family, I can't do it because I get like extremely conscious and awkward. And if I have to watch it myself, I find it an exercise in vanity. So I never, it just never happened. I've never been able to watch anything of it. So I mean, if I watch it, I'm sure I'll find
right,
a hundred things that I would want to change, or I would want to tinker with, and some things
right,
won't
right, right,
work as much.
right, right.
I'm sure that's part of the reason I don't watch it, because right now in my head it's a good film. I don't want to go back to it and say, oh man, this doesn't work.
No, no, no. As someone who has watched the film recently again, and I've seen it many times, it's a great film. So, I remember once
Thank you.
a conversation with Mani Ratnam where he was asked, he has never watched any of his films once they have completed for now, 20 or 25 years. Before that, maybe he had watched. And so they asked him, why not? And he said, because right from the opening credits, I'm going to start thinking that, I missed something here, I missed something there, and that just puts a lot of negativity inside me. So I just don't want to go down that path. It's done with. I'm done. Let's just move on with the next movie. So I always found that funny, because in the rest of the fields, if you think about it, there is a lot of post-mortem, like people
Right.
want to do, where did we go wrong or where did we succeed or something, I don't know. But it's funny that a lot of filmmakers I talk to, they say that. And another reason, I remember once talking to, I forgot, I think it was Sujoy Ghosh, but he said that there is no point in kind of analyzing success or failure anyways, because it could
Absolutely.
be that what one person thinks was, the apparent failure, reasons for failure or success are probably not what the other person thinks, or, it's just one person's opinion. So he said there is nothing that you can really generalize. So that's kind of interesting.
Right. It came to me. The
Please.
other Sam Peckinpah film that, along with
Yes.
The Wild Bunch, is my absolute favorite is Straw Dogs.
Oh, yes, 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 yes. Straw
I
Dogs is
love I love
excellent.
Straw Dogs. I think it's
Yes,
absolutely fantastic.
yes, yes, yes. I'm a big fan of The Getaway as well. I love Getaway as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Uh, um, yeah, Straw Dogs was. Did you see the new one, the new Straw Dogs? They,
No, it wasn't very good, and I didn't
yeah,
want to
yeah,
ruin my. I mean,
yeah. I didn't
the
like it
reviews I
either.
read weren't very good, and I didn't want to ruin my memory of an absolute great film.
Right. Uh, Anyways, coming back to our chat, one thing that stands out with all your films, Sudeep, NH10, even Paatal Lok, Laal Kaptaan, which is another film, by the way, I loved, Udta Punjab and Sonchiriya, is that the attention to detail and the level of authenticity, which of course comes, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but from a lot of meticulous research, right? What have been some of your lessons over the years when it comes to doing great research? What are some of your tips in terms of doing great research so that, it lends an authentic feel to the story that you're writing?
I think it's very important to do on-ground research. It's just sitting in front of a computer or reading a few books is not enough. You really have to, get to the heart of the heart of the matter, the heart of darkness, and meet people. Meet people very closely related to the subject that you're trying to write. Try and get all sides of the story. So if you're writing a bandit story, also make sure you meet a lot of victims. Also make sure you meet a lot of law enforcement. It's very important to do that. Journalists are a great source. So I mean, I normally start by reading up articles, reading up books that have been written by people knowledgeable in the field, be it journalists, authors, and then start off with them because they already have a body of work and they already have a body of contacts that they use for it, and that becomes a great starting point for for this. For example, this a very little known book on the life of Malkhan Singh, which was written by these three authors, one of whom was Prashant Panjyar, and it's like a photo journal of Malkhan Singh's life, and the book is not available anymore. So I actually went to
Mm.
Delhi, met Prashant, and he was kind enough to share some of these contacts, and kind enough to lend the book, and then you meet other journalists, and it just one thing leads to another, and that's a great way to start a research. I really like that. Uh, yeah, and I think it's very important to go in and surrender, not go in with a sense of judgment, not go in with a sense of, oh, he's a smuggler, oh, he's a bandit, oh, I should be not talking to him about this. I
Have
think
an
these
open
guys are
mind.
very
Yeah.
open. Yeah, have a completely open mind, and people are, you know people are very open to people actually want their story to be heard, and they're very open to share their life with you and share their homes with you, and I've never had a bad experience. I've met all kinds of people, in all kinds of places, but I've never had a single bad experience, or something that made me say that, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. In fact, it's for me, it's the most fun part of the job. I don't think I would ever be able to write something without really knowing about a particular place or a particular bunch of people really well. And I think it's so. I mean, there. I always say there are two kinds of writers. One is a writer of familiarity. You write what you know about, and nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't excite me as much. I'm more a writer of curiosity. For me, it's important to uh, every film, every show, whatever that I'm writing, it has to take me to a new place. It has to take me to a territory which I don't know about as much, but I'm curious about. And for me, that making the film is actually an excuse to understand this world and understand this bunch of
Mm,
people and
right.
to understand their life. So it really comes from there. For me, it's a way to travel and to learn more about the country and the world that I live in. Actually,
Do you also think that sometimes it's the outsider who's always able to tell the better story about a certain milieu or certain region?
no, not necessarily, not necessarily. In fact, uh, I wish I was born in all of these places if possible. Because that would just make it that much easier. But no, I don't think so. As long as uh, if the outsider really familiarizes himself with the terrain, I think he can do as good a job as an insider. So I don't worry about the outsider tag. I don't worry about this whole idea of, oh, why are you telling our story? I think everybody's allowed to tell a story. For me, the other thing is language becomes extremely important.
Right.
uh,
Yes.
I
Yes.
I can't write in a language that I don't know, and I don't like my lines being written by someone else. So what I do is I learn the language. So when I was doing research for Urta, I learned Punjabi. When I was doing research for Sonchiriya, I learned Bundelkhandi. And what it's not just being able to write the lines, the spoken lines of the film or the show. Uh, it actually opens you to another world which you would have not otherwise known. I mean, there is a part of, sometimes I still talk to some of my friends in Bundelkhandi, and I enjoy that, or in Punjabi, which is not a language that comes, I mean, it's not something that I grew up with,
Right.
but it's almost like there is a different version of me who is that guy. And I like that. I like that I'm able to actually explore a part of me and explore a world and get to understand a particular world a lot more, just by virtue of having learned the language, which I never otherwise would have access to.
Yeah, and that's part of the appeal of Sonchiriya's appeal as well. I think it's some of the parts are kind of difficult, at least for even for me. I mean, I had to look up the subtitles because I wasn't that comfortable with some of the lines from the film. So, but what it does is that it really feels, like it's these are the people that belong there. I mean, and in a sense that you're glad that they're not talking, clean like Hindi, like we would be, because that's not the language that they speak in, right? I mean, they have their
Absolutely.
language, and they are always going to speak in that language. And sure, it's a movie and everything, but it makes it real, and I think that's part of Sonchiriya's appeal, definitely. Finally, Sudip, I wanted to ask you, what's your favorite scene from the film, or rather, maybe favorite is not the right word, but what's a scene that you really thought that really shaped up, well, the way you wanted it to be, or something that was difficult to crack, and finally you kind of nailed it down?
Now that's a tough one.
And you could tell me more
uh,
than one. I mean, it doesn't have to be one. There's always something
I
that, when you're writing, you like struggle with it for weeks, for months, and then when it finally kind of hits you, you feel
hmm,
satisfied. And
hmm. I think the whole sequence, the set piece of Mansing's death, I really like that, and because there is a lot happening in there. There is a lot of action that needed to be written, and action is always, it takes a lot of effort and craft to get it right, because you need to feel it on the page. You need to sort of feel the tension. You need to feel the movement and all of it. But it also has a lot of emotional drama that is going on in there, that particular scene. it also has some sort of socio-political commentary going on in there. So we were able to get all of that in that one particular sequence, and it kind of sets us up for the film that we're going to watch. And yeah, I was quite happy with that.
Is it true that there were one-time dacoits who were members of the crew, like on the set? This is something that I read on the internet, so not everything is authentic on the internet. But
Yeah, I mean, I didn't meet any of them, but I'm sure they would be. I mean,
so probably
they
that's a
would,
no. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't there on the sets for long, so I wouldn't be able to tell that. But there might be, because you meet a lot of sort of ex dacoits in these parts even today. It's actually pretty easy to meet a dacoit in Chambal if you if you want to. You just have to go looking for one, you'll find one.
Right, right. Awesome, awesome. Well, Sudip, let me just take this moment again to thank you for this movie. This is a great movie. It's one of probably Sushant's best performance in my books, and I absolutely love this movie. And so, thanks a lot for creating Sonchiriya, and thanks again for coming on the podcast and chatting with us about this lovely film.
Thank you, Manchu. I'm glad. In fact, one of the reasons why I agreed to do the podcast is because you wanted to talk about Sonchiriya. Like I told you,
Okay.
it's a film that's very close to my heart, and
Yes, yes.
it's not spoken about as often as I would have liked. So I'm glad I did this, and I really enjoyed this chat. There are not too many of these chats around films that you actually end up enjoying, but I enjoyed this one. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sudip.
If you liked the episode, do share this episode on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your pods. Also, please do rate and review the podcast when you get a chance. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at loveofcinemasf8. Feel free to reach out there or by email with your comments, feedback, and suggestions. You can find my email in the episode notes. That's the episode. This is Himanshu signing off, and as always, thank you for listening to the Love of Cinema podcast.